At exactly 2:33 in the morning, I watched a woman dissolve into mist. And when I checked the headstone she had been standing in front of, I saw her face staring back at me from the photograph embedded in the granite. I need you to stop scrolling. I need you to listen. Because what I am about to tell you is not a campfire story designed to give you chills. This is something that happened to me. Something that changed the way I understand life, death, and everything that might exist between them. I spent 19 years as a night security guard, walking dark corridors and empty parking lots, convincing myself that the shadows held nothing but shadows. I was wrong, and the proof of how wrong I was stands in Section 7, Row 15 of Evergreen Memorial Park, a cemetery in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, where a woman named Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell visits her own grave every single night, where she stood weeping over a life stolen from her too soon, where she whispered 3 words that still echo in my dreams. I'm not ready. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 47 years old. I grew up in a town so small it did not have a stoplight until I was 12. My father worked the assembly line at a brake pad factory for 31 years. My mother served lunch to school children until her knees gave out at 58. We were not poor, but we were not comfortable either. We were the kind of family that understood the value of a dollar, the dignity of hard work, and the foolishness of believing in things you could not see or touch or prove. I inherited that practical worldview like a genetic trait. I did not believe in ghosts. I did not believe in spirits lingering after death. I believed that when the heart stopped and the brain went dark, that was the end. Consciousness snuffed out like a candle flame. Body returned to the earth. Story over. It was not a comforting belief, but it was honest. It helped me sleep at night. It helped me walk through dark cemeteries without flinching. And it was completely catastrophically wrong. I drifted into security work almost by accident. After high school, I bounced between jobs, construction, warehouse work, a brief stint driving delivery trucks for a furniture company that went bankrupt. I was 29 when a friend mentioned that his brother-in-law ran a security firm and was looking for night shift guards. The pay was mediocre, the hours were brutal, and the work was monotonous. I loved it. There was something peaceful about the overnight shift, something meditative about walking the same routes, checking the same doors, watching the same shadows pool in the same corners night after night. I spent 6 years at a warehouse distribution center, 4 years at a shopping mall, 3 years at various construction sites, and another 6 years at a corporate office building downtown. I saw vandals and vagrants, teenagers looking for thrills and homeless people seeking shelter, raccoons that triggered motion sensors, and one memorable opossum that had somehow gotten into the HVAC system. I thought I had seen everything. I thought the night held no more surprises for me. Then I took the job at Evergreen Memorial Park. The position opened up in September 2021. The previous guard had quit without notice, just stopped showing up one day, and never answered his phone again. The security company was desperate to fill the slot, and they offered a slight pay bump as an incentive. I took it without hesitation. A cemetery seemed like the easiest assignment imaginable. No merchandise to protect from thieves. No late-night employees to monitor. No drunk partygoers to escort off the premises. Just 200 acres of headstones and silence. The dead, I reasoned, were the most well-behaved charges a security guard could ask for. They did not cause trouble. They did not file complaints. They just lay there, beneath their blankets of earth and stone, resting in peace. My first shift was October 12, 2021. I arrived at the main gate at 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes early, wearing my standard uniform, black pants, black jacket with the security company logo, steel-toed boots, and a duty belt holding my flashlight, radio, pepper spray, and a small first aid kit. The day shift guard, a heavy-set man named Terry who smelled like cigarettes and disappointment, handed me a ring of keys and a laminated map of the grounds. He showed me the security office, a small building near the main entrance with a desk, a bank of monitors connected to the cemetery's 12 security cameras, a space heater that rattled like it was dying, and a coffee maker that looked like it had not been cleaned since the Clinton administration. He walked me through the basics, patrol the grounds every 2 hours, check that all 7 gates were locked, document anything unusual in the logbook, and radio dispatch every 90 minutes to confirm I was still alive. Not that anything ever happens here, Terry said with a shrug. Place is dead quiet. He laughed at his own joke. I forced a polite smile. An hour later, he was gone, and I was alone with the dead. The first 2 nights were uneventful. I learned the layout of the cemetery, the the winding pathways, the different sections, the landmarks I could use to orient myself in the dark. The older section, dating back to the 1950s and 1960s, sat on the eastern side of the grounds, its headstones weathered and moss-covered, many of the names worn to illegibility by decades of rain and wind. The newer section, where most current burials took place, occupied the western half, neat rows of polished granite and marble, some graves decorated with flowers and flags, and small mementos left by grieving families. A small pond sat near the center of the cemetery, home to a family of ducks that scattered whenever my flashlight beam swept across the water. A stone mausoleum crowned the highest hill, its bronze doors green with verdigris, its interior home to the remains of a wealthy local family that had died out in the 1970s. The chapel near the main entrance was used for funeral services during the day. At night, its stained glass windows were black and lifeless, reflecting my flashlight beam back at me like dark mirrors. I settled into a routine. Patrol at 10:30, then again at 12:30, 2:30, and 4:30. Radio dispatch at 11 o'clock, 12:30, 2 o'clock, 3:30, and 5 o'clock. Fill out the logbook at the end of each patrol. Drink too much coffee. Try not to fall asleep during the long stretches between rounds. The cemetery was peaceful at night, more peaceful than any other site I had worked. The only sounds were natural: owls hooting in the ancient oak trees, wind rustling through leaves, the occasional distant bark of a farm dog somewhere beyond the perimeter fence. I began to enjoy the solitude. I began to think that this would be the easiest job I had ever had. On my third night, October 14th, everything changed. The temperature had dropped significantly from the previous nights. I could see my breath fogging in the beam of my maglite as I made my 2:30 patrol, the cold seeping through my jacket despite the thermal undershirt I wore beneath my uniform. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to cast shadows, but not bright enough to eliminate the pools of darkness that gathered beneath the oak trees and between the larger monuments. I was walking through Section 7, one of the older parts of the cemetery, when I saw her. She was standing about 40 yards ahead of me, motionless, facing away from me toward a headstone I could not quite see from my angle. She was wearing a long blue coat, the kind of elegant wool coat you might see on a woman walking through a wealthy neighborhood in autumn, and her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, stirring slightly in a breeze I could not feel. My first instinct was annoyance. Someone had gotten locked in after closing time, and now I would have to escort them to the gate, explain that the cemetery was closed, fill out an incident report for the morning supervisor. I sighed, adjusted my grip on my flashlight, and called out as I approached. "Excuse me? Ma'am? The cemetery is closed. You can't be here right now." She did not respond. She did not move. She did not even turn her head to acknowledge that she had heard me. She just stood there, frozen, staring at the headstone in front of her with an intensity one could sense even from 40 yards away. I walked closer, my boots crunching softly on the gravel pathway. As I approached, I noticed something strange about her stillness. It was not the stillness of someone lost in thought or absorbed in grief. It was absolute, perfect, unnatural. Normal people fidget. They shift their weight. They breathe visibly, especially in cold air. This woman did none of those things. She was as motionless as the headstones surrounding her, a statue carved from shadow and moonlight. The first prickle of unease crawled up my spine. I slowed my approach, my hand moving instinctively toward the pepper spray on my belt. I had dealt with people on drugs before, people in fugue states, people so deep in psychosis that they had disconnected from reality entirely. This woman's stillness reminded me of those encounters. Something was wrong here. I just could not identify what. I stopped about 15 feet behind her, close enough to see the individual strands of hair lifting in that impossible breeze. Close enough to notice that she cast no shadow, despite the bright moonlight. Close enough to smell something faint and floral, jasmine, maybe, or honeysuckle, drifting toward me on air that should have carried only the scent of cold earth and dying leaves. "Ma'am." My voice came out softer this time, uncertain. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" She moved, slowly, so slowly that I almost did not register it at first. Her head began to turn, degree by degree, as if she were moving through water rather than air. I saw her profile first, high cheekbones, pale skin, a delicate nose. Then she turned further, and I saw her full face, and my heart stopped beating in my chest. She was beautiful, hauntingly, impossibly beautiful. Her skin was so pale it seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. Her dark eyes held a depth of sorrow that made my chest ache just to look at them. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, catching the light, leaving silver trails on her porcelain skin. She looked young, early 30s maybe, but there was something ancient in her expression, something that spoke of grief too heavy for any human lifespan. But that was not what stopped my heart. What stopped my heart was the recognition that flickered in some deep, primal part of my brain. I had seen this face before. Recently, within the past few minutes. I could not remember where, but I knew with absolute certainty that I had seen this exact face somewhere in this cemetery tonight. She looked at me with those devastating eyes. Her lips parted, and she spoke. "I'm not ready." Her voice was barely a whisper, soft as wind through dead leaves, but I heard every syllable with perfect clarity. The words seemed to resonate in my chest, to vibrate in my bones, to echo in the empty spaces between my thoughts. Before I could respond, before I could do anything at all, she was gone. I do not mean she walked away. I do not mean she ran into the shadows. I mean she dissolved. Her form began to break apart like smoke in a sudden wind, her edges blurring, her substance scattering into streamers of silver mist that curled and twisted and faded into nothing. One heartbeat she was there, solid and real, tears still glistening on her cheeks. The next heartbeat, the space where she had stood was empty. Just grass, just moonlight, just the cold October air and the silent headstones and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stood frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. My flashlight trembled in my grip. My heart pounded against my ribs like a caged animal trying to escape. Every rational explanation I tried to construct collapsed before it could fully form. People did not dissolve into mist. People did not stand without breathing, without casting shadows, without making a sound. People did not vanish between one heartbeat and the next. This was not possible. None of this was possible. And yet, I walked forward on legs that did not feel like my own. The headstone she had been facing stood before me, its black granite surface polished smooth, its edges sharp and clean. It was newer than the weathered markers surrounding it, installed within the last few years, maybe. An oval photograph was embedded in the stone, protected by a clear acrylic cover. I raised my flashlight, and the beam fell across the image. The world tilted. My vision tunneled. I felt the ground sway beneath my feet as if an earthquake had struck, though nothing moved except my own failing sense of reality. The photograph showed a woman with dark hair and high cheekbones, with pale skin and dark eyes, with a smile that spoke of a life filled with love and hope and promise. The woman in the photograph was the woman I had just watched dissolve into mist. The same face, the same eyes, the same everything. Below the photograph, carved in elegant script, were the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. March 3rd, 1988 to October 14th, 2019. Beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Gone too soon, but never forgotten. October 14th. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and checked the date. October 14th, 2021. She had died exactly 2 years ago tonight. To the day. To the hour, maybe. To the minute. And she was still here. Still standing at her own grave. Still mourning a life that had been stolen from her. Still not ready to accept that it was over. I do not remember walking back to the security office. I do not remember completing the rest of my patrol, or filling out my logbook or radioing dispatch to confirm I was still alive. I remember sitting at the desk as dawn light crept through the windows, staring at the wall, replaying those 3 words over and over in my mind. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. What did it mean? What could it possibly mean for a dead woman to be not ready? Not ready for what? For death? For peace? For whatever came next? I almost quit that morning. I sat in my car in the parking lot, my phone in my hand, my supervisor's number pulled up on the screen. All I had to do was press the call button. All I had to do was say the words. I can't work there anymore. Something happened. I'm done. But I did not press the button. I did not make the call. Something held me back. Curiosity, maybe. Or stubbornness. Or something deeper, something I did not have a name for yet. I went home instead. I slept for 4 hours, dreaming of dark eyes and dissolving mist. And when night fell, I went back. She was there, at exactly 2:33 a.m., in exactly the same spot, wearing the same blue coat, her dark hair lifting in that impossible breeze. She appeared without warning. One moment the space in front of the headstone was empty. The next moment she was there, as solid and real as any living person. She stood with her back to me, her shoulders trembling slightly, staring down at the photograph of her own face. And at exactly 2:50 a.m., 17 minutes later, she dissolved into mist and vanished. I watched her every night for 2 weeks, always from a distance, always hidden in the shadows between monuments, my flashlight off, my breath held, my heart pounding. I watched her appear and weep and disappear. I counted the minutes. I noted the patterns. I convinced myself that observation was enough, that understanding would come if I simply gathered enough data. But understanding did not come. The data refused to assemble itself into anything that made sense. All I had were questions, an endless, multiplying swarm of questions that kept me awake during the day and drew me back to Section 7 every night. I began researching Sarah Mitchell. The internet provided fragments of her story, scattered across news articles and social media posts and online memorial pages. She had been an elementary school teacher at a school about 10 miles from the cemetery. 4th grade. 23 students who had adored her, who had written letters and drawn pictures that were collected into a memorial book and presented to her parents at the funeral. She had been engaged to a man named Daniel Harrison, a software developer who had proposed on a beach in North Carolina on their 3-year anniversary. They had been planning a spring wedding, lilacs and roses, a string quartet, vows they had written themselves. On October 14, 2019, Sarah was driving home from a late-night staff meeting. She was on a two-lane road about 3 miles from her apartment when a drunk driver ran a red light at an intersection and struck her car at nearly 50 miles per hour. The impact killed her instantly. She was 31 years old. The drunk driver survived with minor injuries. He was arrested at the scene with a blood alcohol level nearly 3 times the legal limit. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for vehicular manslaughter. The judge called it a senseless tragedy. The newspapers printed photographs of Sarah smiling, surrounded by students full of life. The community planted a memorial garden at her school. Her students left flowers at the crash site for months afterward, and then gradually the world moved on. The way the world always does. The living kept living. The dead stayed dead. Except Sarah did not stay dead. Not completely. Something had kept her here, tethered to her grave, trapped between worlds, unable to accept that her story was over. And I, for reasons I still do not fully understand, was the only one who could see her. It was November 14th, exactly 1 month after my first sighting, exactly 3 years since her death, when I finally found the courage to approach her again. The night was bitterly cold, the temperature hovering just above freezing, frost glittering on the grass like scattered diamonds. I walked to Section 7, Row 15, and waited in the darkness. At 2:33 a.m., she appeared. The same way she always did. Out of nothing. Into something. Solid and real and impossibly, heartbreakingly present. I did not hide this time. I did not watch from a distance. I walked toward her, my footsteps deliberately loud on the gravel path, announcing my presence. She did not turn. She did not acknowledge me. She just stood there, weeping silently, her tears catching the moonlight. I stopped about 5 feet away, close enough to see the individual droplets sliding down her cheeks, close enough to feel the cold that radiated from her, not the cold of the October air, but something deeper, something that seemed to come from beyond the veil of the living world. Sarah? My voice came out as a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again. Sarah, my name is Marcus. I've been watching you. For a while now. I think maybe you need someone to talk to. She turned. Slowly. Those dark eyes met mine, and I felt the weight of her grief crash over me like a wave. It was overwhelming, a sorrow so profound, so all-encompassing, that I felt tears spring to my own eyes in response. She was so young, so beautiful, so full of unlived life. It was not fair. None of this was fair. You can see me. It was not a question. Her voice was soft, ethereal, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. In 3 years, you're the first one who ever stopped. The first one who ever looked at me like I was real. I can see you, I said. I don't understand how. I don't understand any of this. But I can see you. She looked at me for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression, something that might have been the ghost of a smile. Neither do I, she said. Neither do I. That was the beginning of our strange friendship. Every night, I would walk to Section 7 and wait. Every night, she would appear at 2:33, and we would talk until she dissolved at 2:50. 17 minutes. That was all we had. 17 minutes per night, carved out of the space between worlds. But in those minutes, she told me everything. Her childhood in rural Pennsylvania. Her college years in Ohio. The day she met Daniel at a coffee shop and knew instantly, knew with absolute certainty, that she was going to marry him. She told me about her students. Their names. Their struggles. Their triumphs. The way their faces lit up when they finally understood something they had been struggling with. She told me about the lesson plans she had prepared for the weeks after her death, lessons that were still sitting in her desk drawer, waiting for a teacher who would never come back. And she told me about the accident, the headlights appearing out of nowhere, the screech of tires, the impact that she barely remembered, just a flash of white and then nothing. Waking up at her own funeral, standing in the back of the church, watching her mother sob and her father stand frozen in shock and Daniel collapse against the altar, unable to speak. She had tried to reach them, tried to touch them, tried to scream that she was still here, still present, still not ready to go. But no one could see her. No one could hear her. She was a ghost at her own funeral, invisible to everyone she loved. "That's why I come here," she said one night, her eyes fixed on the photograph embedded in her headstone. "It's the only place where I feel real, where I can see my own face and remember that I existed, that I mattered." "You mattered," I said, my voice thick. "You still matter." She looked at me, and for the first time since I had met her, something other than sorrow flickered in her eyes. Something that might have been hope. "Do I?" she whispered. "Do I still matter, Marcus? Because from where I'm standing, the world has moved on. My students have new teachers. My parents have learned to smile again. Daniel is trying to live again. Everyone has moved on except me. I'm the only one still stuck here, still grieving, still not ready." "Not ready for what?" She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "To accept that it's over. That I won't grow old. That I won't have children. That all those futures I imagined, all those years I thought I had, they're just gone. Erased. Like they never existed at all." She turned back to her headstone, to the photograph of her smiling face. "I was 31, Marcus. I had so much life left. So much love to give. And now I'm just this. A ghost. A memory. A woman who visits her own grave and weeps for everything she lost." I did not have an answer for her. There was no answer. No words could undo the injustice of her death, could restore the decades that had been stolen from her, could make any of this fair. All I could do was stand beside her in the darkness and bear witness to her grief. All I could do was listen. The months passed. Autumn gave way to winter, and winter thawed into spring. I stood with Sarah through rain and snow, through bitter cold and gentle warmth. I brought her flowers on her birthday, sunflowers, because she told me they were her favorites, because they reminded her of summer and hope and everything bright in the world. I brought photographs printed from her old Facebook page, images of her with friends, with family, with Daniel. I watched her study those photographs with hunger in her eyes, as if she were trying to absorb every detail, trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. And slowly, something began to change. The sorrow in her eyes began to soften. The tears came less frequently. She started to smile sometimes when I told her stories about my life, about the ridiculous things I witnessed on my patrols, about the security camera footage of a raccoon that had learned to open the lid of a trash can. She started to talk about her life with something other than grief, with gratitude, sometimes, for the years she had been given, with wonder at the love she had experienced, with acceptance creeping in at the edges that her story had been short but not empty, not meaningless. "I'm starting to understand something," she told me one night, about 8 months into our friendship. "I didn't get the life I planned, but I got a life, a good life, 31 years of love and purpose and meaning. I touched people, Marcus, my students, my family, Daniel. I made a difference, even if it was a small one. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that has to be enough." "Is it?" I asked. "Is it enough for you to let go?" She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Not yet. But soon. I think I'm getting there." It was on March 3rd, 2023, what would have been her 35th birthday, that Sarah finally found peace. I arrived at her grave as the sun was setting, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers and a cupcake with a single candle that I felt foolish about but brought anyway. I laid the flowers at the base of her headstone, set the cupcake beside them, and waited as darkness fell over the cemetery. The night was cool but not cold, the first hints of spring softening the edges of winter. I could smell fresh-cut grass and early blossoms, could hear birds settling into their nests in the oak trees overhead. The world was waking up, renewing itself, preparing for another cycle of life and growth and change. At 2:33 a.m., Sarah appeared. But this time, something was different. She was glowing. Not the faint, pale luminescence that had always surrounded her, but a warm, golden light that seemed to radiate from somewhere deep inside her. She was smiling, not the sad, wistful smile I had grown accustomed to, but a real smile, radiant and peaceful and full of joy. She looked at me with eyes that no longer held sorrow. They held love. Pure, unburdened love. "You remember my birthday," she said. Of course I did. She laughed, a sound I had never heard from her before, bright and clear and alive. "A cupcake, Marcus? Really? I didn't know what else to bring a ghost for her birthday," I admitted. She laughed again, and the sound made my heart ache with a strange mixture of joy and grief. I knew somehow that I was hearing it for the last time. "Thank you," she said, her voice softening. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for standing beside me in the darkness and reminding me that I wasn't alone. Sarah, I'm ready now." She stepped toward me, and the golden light around her intensified, warm and beautiful and impossibly bright. "I've spent almost 4 years standing at my own grave, weeping for everything I lost. But you helped me remember everything I had, everything I was, everything I gave to the world, even in just 31 years. She reached out and touched my cheek. Her hand was warm, warmer than it had ever been, warmer than any living hand I had ever felt. "You gave me permission to let go, Marcus. You gave me permission to be at peace. I'm going to miss you." The words came out broken, barely audible through the tears streaming down my face. "I know." She smiled that radiant smile. "But I'll never really be gone. I'll be in the sunflowers you plant, in the stories you tell, in the kindness you show to everyone you meet." She paused, and something flickered in her eyes. One last moment of the woman she had been, the teacher who had dedicated her life to helping others grow. "There's something I need you to do for me. Anything. Find Daniel. Tell him I love him. Tell him I'm at peace. And tell him," her voice wavered, "tell him it's okay to live again. Tell him to take off that ring he wears around his neck and put it away. Tell him to find someone new, someone wonderful, someone who will love him the way he deserves to be loved. Tell him I give my blessing. I give my permission. I give my love. I will," I promised. "I swear I will." She nodded, satisfied. Then she stepped back, and the golden light around her blazed so bright I had to shield my eyes. I heard her voice one last time, soft and distant, floating on an invisible wind. "Thank you, Marcus. For everything. For seeing me. For hearing me. For helping me understand that 31 years was enough." And then the light faded, and she was gone. Not dissolved into mist like before. Gone. Truly, finally, peacefully gone. The space where she had stood was empty. Just grass and moonlight, and the silent headstone with her photograph smiling out at the world. I sank to my knees beside her grave, and wept until dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. I kept my promise. I found Daniel through social media, sent him a message that probably sounded insane, and waited to be blocked or reported or ignored. Instead, he called me. We talked for hours. I told him everything. Every conversation, every tear, every moment of Sarah's 3.5-year vigil at her own grave. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. "I always knew she was still here," he finally said, his voice thick with tears. "I could feel her sometimes, late at night, like she was standing right beside me." "She was," I said. "She was watching over you. She loved you so much, Daniel. She never stopped loving you." He broke down then, great, heaving sobs that came through the phone line like waves crashing on a shore. I cried with him. Two strangers, connected by a woman we had both loved in different ways, grieving and healing together across the miles. Daniel visits the cemetery often now. We have become friends, unlikely friends, bound together by the impossible. He has started living again, just as Sarah wanted. He took off the engagement ring he wore around his neck and placed it in a box with her photographs and letters. He started dating, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Last month, he told me he had met someone. A woman named Claire, a second-grade teacher at a school across town. He said Sarah would have liked her. I still work at Evergreen Memorial Park. I still walk the grounds between midnight and dawn, checking gates and writing reports. But I stop at Section 7, Row 15 every night. I stand in front of Sarah's headstone and talk to her, Tell her about my day, about Daniel, about the world she left behind. I know she cannot hear me. I know she has moved on to whatever beautiful place awaits those who have made peace with their lives. But I talked to her anyway, because she taught me something important. She taught me that the dead are never truly gone as long as someone remembers them, as long as someone speaks their name, as long as someone stands at their grave and says, I see you. I remember you. You mattered. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell was not ready to die. For 3.5 years, she was not ready to let go. But when she finally did, when she finally accepted that her short, bright life had meant something, had touched people, had made a difference in the world, she walked into the light with grace and courage and peace. And she left behind a legacy that will never fade. In Daniel's heart, in the memories of her students, in the stories I tell to everyone who will listen, and in you now, in your mind, where Sarah will live on long after you finish hearing these words. If you have lost someone you love, know this, they are not gone. They linger in the places that mattered to them, in the hearts of those who loved them, in the whispered memories that surface when you least expect them. And sometimes they are waiting to be seen, waiting to be heard, waiting for someone to help them remember that their life mattered. Be that person. Stop. Look. Listen. You never know whose soul you might help to save. Every night, when the clock strikes 2:33, I close my eyes and whisper into the darkness. Rest well, Sarah. You were ready, and you are loved. Somewhere in the silence, I swear I can hear her answer.